When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about who actually betrayed Arianne in her plot to kind of crown Myrcella and Dorne in Feast. We're going to talk about who I believe actually was the person that ended up doing it, and kind of eliminating the common candidates and all of that. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps the channel grow and reach our people that might like this content as well. And let's get into the video. So the main suspects we see would be the people that are kind of with Arianne, because as we're going to talk about later in this video, if it is not one of these people, right, it kind of makes sense why Duran would actually let Arianne go. Because if it's any of these people we're going to talk about in this video, Duran would never have let Arianne actually leave. So the main suspects we usually talk about are Eris Oakheart, Darkstar, Garen the Orphan, Andri Dalt, and Sylvia Santagar. And these are all of her companions, right? These are all the people that are there. And a couple of these we can just kind of get rid of right off the bat, right? Eris Oakheart, we see in the chapter before this one that he's completely devoted to Arianne, and he's not kind of the plotting type. So again, it wouldn't really make sense for him to tell Duran. Darkstar, this one really doesn't make sense for me either, because here's the thing. Gerald wants to kill Myrcella. Now, he could have done this just as easily on the road without telling Duran any of this. And actually, Duran, knowing this, makes Darkstar's whole plan even harder to accomplish. Because as we're kind of told that Darkstar probably could have beaten Eris Oakheart and all of the other people accompanying Arianne. So if he wanted to at any point, he could have probably changed on them and then killed Myrcella. But we see that, so I think he's out. I think that leaves three main candidates: Garen, Andri, and Sylvia, or Silva, whichever you want to say. And for me, here's the problem with all three of these candidates. We know that they are very close to Arianne, right? They're all involved heavily in the planning of the kind of Queen's plot and all that stuff. But here's my one problem. For Duran to kind of know about all this, he would have had to have known about the plot after they had already left. Because Duran is a very cautious man. We know that. We know that from everything that's been going on with the Dornish plot, that he is not someone that's going to just let things happen and maybe it goes well. Because as we see, Myrcella nearly dies because of this. So Duran definitely, if he had known about the plot, would have initially, made them not go. Like, he would have imprisoned them all like the Sand Snakes and all that. So I think for me, that eliminates all three of these candidates, because realistically, it doesn't make sense. Now, maybe one of these characters left a note for Duran to kind of figure it out, or gave some information to where Duran would find out after they had left. But again, doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you were going to betray Arianne, you would do it before they left. So for me, these characters don't make a lot of sense. Now, there's one character we're going to talk about that I think makes a lot of sense. Now, you have to believe a little bit. That is kind of hard to believe maybe, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and it makes a lot of sense where this character is going in the next book as well. Another interesting thing I want to bring up here, besides Darkstar and Eris Oakheart, before me naming them, could you have named those three characters that are Arianne's companions? Because for a twist, because I'm assuming we're going to find out eventually who did it, right? Because I think it is a major thing in Arianne's story. It has to be a character that we, A, are going to care about, and two, that play a larger role in the story. So these three characters that I brought up, that I couldn't even name without going to the wiki, do they make sense here as someone that would betray Arianne and have an impact on the story? No. And say if it was one of those three characters, it's not George R. R. Martin's kind of way of writing, where, again, it's the obvious, it's like, okay, yeah, these three, it makes kind of sense, but it's kind of what we're all led to believe, right? So I think for me, the person that I believe actually betrayed Arianne is going to be Tyene, one of the three Sand Snakes that we see in Duran's kind of, or I guess not Duran, but Areo Hoda's POV chapter, when they're going to leave and all that. They're leaving the Water Gardens and they end up going to Arianne and all that stuff. And she's the last one we meet. Now, Tyene is always described as the most dangerous one of the three, because here's the thing. they all think, when we have this kind of, I guess, throne scene where, Tyene is talking to Duran, Arya Hoda almost believes that she poisons Duran when she looks at his hand and all that, and kind of maybe scratches it or something like that. And it's very reminiscent of, okay, we can't trust Tyene, and she's this one that is able to kind of manipulate people and play the game well based upon how she kind of acts and stuff like that. So in this next part of the video, we're going to talk about what were her motivations and why do I believe it makes sense narratively why she could be the person that did it. Now, the first big question I want to answer, and you guys might be thinking, how would Tyene even know of the plot and or any of the information going on? She wasn't there and all that. And this is why I believe it makes perfect sense, because Tyene wasn't there. Tyene would have been the one telling Duran that, hey, this is what they're trying to do and all that stuff. Also, we know for a fact that Tyene was one of Arianne's closest kind of friends, or they were kind of family technically, and all that. So she tells a lot of her secrets to Tyene. And Duran even brings this up when they're talking later on about kind of what Duran's actual plan is and all that stuff, where Duran says, if I would have told you this information, you would have told it to Tyene, and this wouldn't have been a secret anymore. Right? So, and Tyene also, or not Tyene, sorry, Arianne thinks about this a lot, that she is very close to Tyene, but Arianne never suspects Tyene. Right? And I think it's interesting because Tyene definitely would have known Arianne's intentions based upon everything we're given information on. But as a character, we don't suspect. It's not someone that's kind of on the suspect list right off the bat. And also, the big thing with Tyene is not a no-name character. She's definitely someone that is very impactful and is set up in a big situation where in Winds of Winter, she could be very impactful as well. And another thing I want to point out is that Arianne, as good as she is of maybe a manipulator of men and stuff like that, she obviously doesn't understand Darkstar's true nature, as we see Darkstar betrays her at the end of the chapter as well. But she could easily look past who people are. Tyene, again, like I've said with the almost poisoning Duran, or people believe that she could have the capacity to do that. Tyene's a scary person, right? She's a sand snake. She's very skilled in poison and stuff like that. It's something I don't think Arianne sees of her. And yeah, so getting to the next part of this, we're going to be talking about Tyene's motives. What could make her possibly do this and why she would be betraying Arianne. So my motive is, okay, give me a chance to explain it, is that Tyene is kind of working for Varys. Because think about who would benefit from Arianne not going through with this plan, besides maybe someone like Duran or something like that. But we have to think of someone close to her that benefits from this. Now, maybe Tyene does this to get a deal to get the Sand Snakes out of imprisonment. But again, that doesn't really make a lot of sense because the Sand Snakes know they're not going to be killed or anything. And they're living in pretty decent cells. So it's like, that one doesn't make any sense. They know they're going to get released at some point. But the thing that makes it very interesting here is that Aegon, if they are to be married, right? Let's say Myrcella is crowned and all that stuff. Right off the bat, Dorne no longer has a chance of allying with Aegon because they're not going to support Aegon when they're already crowning Myrcella. So Tyene, I think, possibly could be working for Varys because we have this other thing that is brought up in this chapter is that Arianne knows Tyene's mother. And we know that Tyene's mother was a Septin. And there's another Septin we know that's with Aegon right now, Septin Lamore. And a lot of people think this could be Ashara, but I have one big problem with that, is that Tyrion spends a lot of time around Septin Lamore, and not once is the big purple eyes of Ashara, something that's very noticeable, ever brought up, but it's brought up for Aegon, all these other characters. And to me, either George is doing some pretty bad writing here and just trying to hold that surprise in when in reality it's not. It kind of feels lazy at that point. So for me, I think it makes more sense if this is Tyene's mother. Now, Lamore is about 40-ish, And then also Tyenne's about 20. So again, the age would work out. We also know that Lamore actually gave birth to someone, and that this could be Tyene. And to me, it makes perfect sense, right? Varys tries to have somebody with, a decent amount of influence or power in Dorne to try to get them to stop from ever going with the Lannisters or all this stuff and going with an Aegon. And that's exactly what ends up happening. So for me, this makes a ton of sense. Now we're going to talk about a couple more things that I think even go more into why Tyene would want to do this as well. Now, you may also be thinking that Lamore actually has a different hair color than what Tyene's mother is described as having. But again, that's a lot more easy to kind of unpack because you have a bunch of people trying to hide their identities already than someone having a completely different eye color. And especially someone that has as significant of eyes as Ashara. That's the one big quality a lot of people talk about when they talk about Ashara. So for me, that kind of is like, okay, it's more explainable with it being Tyene's mother. Now also think about it from a narrative point of view, right? Arianne is going to see Aegon. Who is also going to be there? Lamore. So Septin Lamore is going to be here as well. This is a perfect opportunity to reveal her kind of actual identity, and also it kind of can start to build on and get Arianne thinking who betrayed her if Lamore is this person that is already with Aegon. And then we'd see that Arianne as well, if she gets involved with Aegon, will eventually go to King's Landing. And if you're like someone that believes in that like me, I think Aegon will actually win. And I think someone that's going to be a huge impact on how they take the city is Tyene is going to see the High Sparrow in King's Landing. Now, this is where I believe we will get our reunion of these two characters. And at this point, I believe Arianne will know the truth about Tyene and kind of all of that. Now, something else that's very interesting that I want to talk about in this video is Tyene actually basically gives the idea of what Arianne is doing to Doran. And we get to gauge what Doran's reaction is to this plot. Doran would never go for it. It's a no-no, and that's the thing. Tyene can gauge the waters, see what is really going on here. Would Doran actually go with this plot if it did happen, or would he shut it down? And this is Tyene's way of confirming that if she rats out Arianne, that this will not happen. And that is exactly what ends up happening. So I think a lot of the pieces fit for this theory, and I think it's going to be a really great reveal and kind of showing how Arianne still is not the best at reading people. She's good at a lot of other things, but when it comes to seeing who the person is, a characteristic very much like Catelyn, where she isn't able to see through people's kind of lies and stuff like that, like a cat or like a Littlefinger type situation. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think it possibly could have been Tyene? Do you think it was one of the companions with Arianne? Do you think there's reasoning for why they might do it? Or do you think this was actually someone we maybe just don't know and it's not as significant as it's meant to be? But this is something I've always asked and I've always wondered. And I think I finally kind of put it together, and I feel like Tyene is the character that did it. I feel pretty strongly about that, but let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.